Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Pulse of the Pack. It is Thursday night, 9:30 p.m. as we record this. I've got a lot going on right here. If you guys see me looking up, I've got Game 4 of the American League Championship Series on behind me. The Yankees currently trail 3-1. Savages in the box look a lot more like puppies. I don't really know what the opposite of Savages is, but it's not going very well at this point. Joined with me tonight is Jason Perrone. Jason, another day closer to our trip to Green Bay.
That we are. This game has been intriguing because it looked like a good matchup at the beginning of the season. Then Panthers kind of struggled a little bit. Cam Newton was more interested in his post-game outfits than playing on the field. So it didn't look like they were going to be very good, and now they're good again. So I think we're going to see a good game at Lambeau Field come November the 10th? The 10th, yes.
Yeah, they haven't lost since Cam Newton exited the lineup. Kyle Allen has been a winner in each of his 4 starts. We'll see how that goes here before they play Green Bay. And the Packers, by the skin of their teeth, finally get that monkey of the Detroit Lions off of their back. They get a 23-22 win as time expires with a victory over the Detroit Lions, a game that they trailed by 13 at one point, and then they trailed 22-13 with about 10 minutes left to play. The Packers would score in each of their last 2 possessions before coming away with a big victory. Jason, since it's later in the week, I kind of want to do this in a general sense here, but let's talk first about the defense and how they were able to really, they got punched in the mouth on those first 2 drives. And after that, it was pretty much smooth sailing for the defense. They were able to hold the Lions to field goals if they were in scoring range. They played well off of turnovers, what Mike McCarthy would call adversity defense, quick change defense, all kinds of different things that is referred to as. So they were able to do that. And then later in the game, they were able to make some big stops and big moments, which is something this defense hasn't done often enough in the last 10 years. So with that in mind, the Packers were able to make the plays on defense when it mattered. And we'll get into the rest of the stuff here in a little bit. But ultimately, this, in my opinion, was Green Bay's best game on defense since the Chicago game to open the season. So that's some pretty high watermark there. Now, I know they gave up 22 points and some of that stuff, but they really were able to control the game without forcing turnovers. And without being able to force turnovers, that's something you're going to have to be able to do. Because when you face Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, although he's been injured and we hope for the best for him, Deshaun Watson, some of the best quarterbacks in football, Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, they're not going to turn the ball over. So you have to be able to force teams to punt. The Packers were able to do that against Matthew Stafford, who's not on that list, but he's kind of in that next tier of guys like that. So, Jason, what were your thoughts on the defense on Monday night?
Well, first of all, when you're talking about getting a monkey off your back and the Detroit Lions, that's the first time I think in my long life that I've ever heard that. So I don't ever want to hear that again.
Hopefully we never
defensively,
do.
Well, especially with Matt Patricia. But anyway, the defense. The defense obviously was the star of the night because one of the reasons why we are trying to rebut all of this controversial garble from Lions fans and from NFL fans and from the media and from Packers fans and everybody is, look, were there some questionable calls? Yes, there were. But the Packers defense forced the Lions to kick 5 field goals. So you said, yeah, they scored 22. Yeah, they gave up 22 points. Well, it could have been in the 40s. If Detroit converts on some of those drives and they actually find the end zone and TJ Hawkinson doesn't drop a ball in the end zone and other things that remind us that the Lions are still in a lot of ways the Lions. So, yeah, the defense was great. Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith again with a sack each. I would love for one of your sons, Rashawn Gary, to find his way at some point so I can remember whether or not he actually played in the game. But the defense rose up really big again. And again, you had contributions from guys who weren't intended to be regular starters. We didn't see much from Chandon Sullivan this game. He had the big pick against the Cowboys, but Will Redmond had a nice pass breakup. Some would say it was pass interference late in the game on Marvin Jones, who only had 2 catches after having terrorized the Packers for many, many games prior to that. I don't think it was PI. I don't think he impeded the play. So give Redmond some credit. He's not the guy you want out there in certain situations, but for depth, that's one thing that's going to separate really, really good teams from average teams and below average teams is their depth can step in and keep them above water and play. And that's what's happening. When Kenny Clark doesn't have a great night, other guys step up and make great plays. Your next door neighbor, Dean Lowry from Rockford, Illinois, had a great game, probably his best game of the season. So they're getting contributions all over the depth chart on defense. I mean, I love the job Mike Pettine's doing. The defense was definitely the star of the show if you had to pick one.
Yeah, definitely agree in that regard. As far as Rashawn Gary, it's been a bit of a rough go, no question there. He only played 9 snaps on Monday night. So we'll see if that fluctuation continues. Eventually, you'd like to see him start making a couple of plays. But for now, it looks like he's very firmly entrenched as that team's third or fourth edge rusher, and it might depend on the week. Kyler Fackrell outsnapped him this week. We'll see if that remains the case moving forward. But something else you mentioned was just some of the contributions from some of the other guys. You said best game of the season. That might have been Dean Lowry's best game of his career. There were so many good things he was able to do for the Packers on Monday night. And really, I think the run defense, the improvement that happened on Monday night started with him. So that was definitely a big positive for the Packers because they've struggled stopping the run. And they're going to face a Raiders team this week that wants to run the ball. John Gruden has talked about that on more than one occasion. So we will see if Green Bay is able to do that. Offensively, man, what is there to say? It was a survive and advance kind of game. I want to start with Jamal Williams because he was, in my opinion, at least the offensive player of the game. He had one of his better nights, and this Yankees game just ended. It is 6-1 Houston now in the 6th inning, so this game is over, and the Yankees are going to be facing elimination tomorrow night against Justin Verlander, so that's not positive. But anyways, Jamal Williams, I thought had the best game of his career, and is really starting to get that 1-2 punch that the Packers want with Aaron Jones. And Aaron Jones didn't have a great night. He fumbled. He dropped a touchdown. I mean, those are plays that elite caliber running backs make or don't make in the case of fumbling the ball. And Jones had a bad night. And Jamal Williams picked the team up, especially on a night where by the end of it was Alan Lazard and Darius Shepard and Jake Coomer and a bunch of non-NFL great players, basically. Maybe they will be one day, but they certainly aren't right now, taking on the receiver role for Aaron Rodgers. So, Jason, what were your thoughts on Williams? Are the Packers building? Devontae Adams said that you were on meth if you thought that wasn't the best 1-2 punch in the league. I don't know if I'll go that far, but I mean, this is a pretty formidable group. Williams has certainly gotten better, and I think that's something that's been evident in this season.
Yeah, they got a good rotation. Now, when those guys are healthy, they're churning. And, I'm looking forward to a game where the two of them put it together in the same game. Dallas was all about Aaron Jones, 4 touchdowns. Detroit was the Jamal Williams show. And if they can put it together, that takes a lot of pressure off of the rest of the offense. And if you look at the wide receiver situation right now, it's kind of up in the air. Got some injuries. Devontae Adams may or may not play. They had to sign Ryan Grant, not that Ryan Grant, this week for some depth. And so if any kind of pressure you can take off of the passing game is helpful. I mean, these guys are playing great, and Williams he's a big loss in any situation. He just runs hard, he runs well. He's kind of that safety valve. He's almost like a combination of like Brandon Jackson and John Kuhn put together. If I could put two guys together to make up who Jamal Williams is. I mean, he's not a fullback, but he's just that secure guy now that like he's going to make a block when he needs to make a block. He's a smart player. He can get active in the passing game. Like he just he doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and he's steady Eddie back there. He's a guy that you want. The Packers running the ball is just a nice thing to see. This was a game where the Packers haven't really defended the run very well. They ran well against the Cowboys, but could they continue that? And the Packers absolutely smashed Detroit in the run game in this particular game, and they came out way ahead, over 100 yards, and could have been more if Aaron Jones had his head screwed on straight. Although I'm convinced that there's a chance that I think he took a shot early in the game that might have really impacted him. I don't know if he was dealing with some wooziness there, but these running backs are great, and the offense. Give credit to the offensive line too. The graders up front. I mean, Elton Jenkins, what a find! Just a brick, and he's a guy that I think single-handedly is helping the run game. These other four guys have played together for a while, not Billy Turner, but these other guys have played together, Bakhtiari, Bulaga, Corey Linsley. But you had Elton Jenkins in there, and all of a sudden this offense can do a bunch of stuff. Now, I know Matt LaFleur and the offense is different. It's a different approach, but, it takes an entire machine to make the whole thing go. And so credit to all of it all the way around. It's, if you can run the football, it's all about passing to win. But if you can run the football, then you set up a lot of fun things in the passing game later on.
Yeah, and they hopefully are able to do that in the near future with Marquez Valdes-Scantling getting healthy, Davante Adams coming back. The Packers added receiver Ryan Grant, not to be confused with the guy who used to play running back for the Packers in the late 2000s and then some of the 2010s as well, I believe is the way that you say that. So the offense as a whole struggled, and I want to talk about Allen Lazard because he really did save the day. I mean, of all of the darling undrafted wide receivers from this offseason, it's been difficult, tough sledding really for Green Bay because they don't have anybody that's proven beyond Davante Adams. Even Marquez Valdes-Scantling, he does some nice things at times, but he's far from a consistent player. And then when he went down, Geronimo Allison went down with a concussion during the Lions game as well. And they were able to kind of just find a way. And Allen Lazard was a big reason why. A big catch down the sideline. They always say the guy on the bench, be ready when your number's called. Well, his number was called, and he delivered in a big way. So that was nice to see. Rodgers wanted his number called later in the game. He mentioned as much in his post-game press conference that he was kind of lobbying for him to get him on the field. I mean, really right now it's a mash unit at receiver for the Packers. They have MVS, Allison, and Davante Adams have not practiced this week yet. It's Thursday, so they might practice tomorrow. We'll get their designation for their injuries tomorrow. If they don't play, then you're talking about Jake Kumerow, who, despite his folklore, has done nothing since being on the roster. I think he had 2 catches the other night. Good for him. You have Darius Shepard, who had a really bad game on Monday night. Now, I'm not saying that he's a bad player or anything like that. He just had a bad game on Monday night. Those are the facts. 2 turnovers directly caused from Darius Shepard. And then you have Ryan Grant, who just got here on Tuesday. And you have Allen Lazard, who had a big game but hadn't been able to get on the field before then. Jason, what's the concern level at this point for Sunday looking at Oakland if these are your wide receivers?
Well, I don't know if that's going to necessarily be the case. If that is the case, then yeah, I guess it's not ideal. But, let's not forget who the quarterback is here. I don't think Allen Lazard is just going to walk out there and catch 10 balls for 200 yards and score 2 touchdowns. He might surprise us all. But you got Aaron Rodgers and you've got running backs who can take some of that burden off. And don't forget Danny Vitale as a fullback too. It's the Raiders. They can be, their defense is okay. So I think some opportunities are going to be there. You never dial it in. You never call it in and say, okay, we can get by this week with or without. Davante Adams is still being kind of coy about whether or not he's going to play. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's not optimal, but it's hard to argue with a team that's 5-1 and was able to overcome what they overcame against the Lions. And this year's team is just different. When they find themselves in tough spots, they're not folding and bending. They're not folding over is what I meant to say. They're not folding over and kind of falling apart. They're rising up and they're making plays. And, maybe the defense has to carry it again for one more week. But, with Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball the way he has and that he's not having to throw it 50 times to get them a victory, I think they can be fine. Mercedes Lewis, nice safety valve. I mentioned Vitale. You got the running backs. Even if Oakland knows it's coming, the Packers have really good horses on offense to still execute it well and make things happen. And if push comes to shove, the big key for the Packers is if you're not getting the production in the passing game, then you've got to extend the clock. You got to convert your second and third downs and keep the Oakland defense on the field. And again, like I've said many times, make the offense your 12th defender almost.
Yeah, that could be the story on Sunday. And I'll say something for sure as far as the tight end position goes. I've tried with Jimmy Graham. I can't anymore. He had one nice catch on a crossing route late in the game that helped. But otherwise, the 3rd and 12 play where they dump the ball off to him, any relatively athletic player, I think, picks up that first down. And Graham he's a plotter, and he fell like a sack of potatoes. And I think Graham was a great player. He's been nothing but a professional since being in Green Bay. He doesn't like talking to the media. I guess you could say that wasn't all that professional, but it just hasn't been very good. You want to talk about mistakes that Brian Gutekunst has made, and he's made plenty of good moves, but signing Graham and then choosing to keep him appears to be one of his bigger mistakes, and we'll see if they stick around. I know Peter Bukowski has the theory from Packer Report that the Packers could kind of find an injury for Jimmy Graham, if you will, to put him on injured reserve instead of embarrassing him because he's a proud veteran. And that's something that I'm sure has been done in the past. I can't think of specific examples, but especially if Tanyan and Sternberg are healthy, right now they're almost probably playing him out of necessity because you have an undrafted free agent in Evan Bayless that's currently on the roster. And I think Ethan Wolf might be on the roster now too. I'll have to check that to be sure. But they don't really have much of a choice at this point but to keep Graham on the field. So that's where we're at with the tight end spot. It's been a rough go, really. I mean, even when Jared Cook was here, he was a good player, and he did some nice things in some big moments, but I think we've overrated his value a little bit in Green Bay. He certainly wasn't a great tight end. Really, I mean, honestly, since the days of Jermichael Finley, the tight end position's been a black hole, and it remains that way. The hope is that Jace Sternberger can alleviate that, but for now, he has been on injured reserve. They activated him or chose to designate him as somebody to return this week, but the Packers they haven't been able to get any production out of that. And I think Mercedes Lewis, should play a vast majority of those snaps at tight end because Jimmy Graham, he just simply doesn't have it anymore. The end of the game, Jason, obviously we can't go through this game without talking about the way the officials played a part in it. My thought process on it has been very clear, and I want to kind of just address it a little bit, and that is that I'm not excusing the calls or lack thereof. I'm not excusing poor officiating. I think officiating is probably better than it ever has been. We just notice the screw-ups more because we have a billion cameras at these games that show it angle by angle by angle by angle, and that makes the officials' jobs even harder. You add that, and then they have a billion rules with a million different gray areas, and it makes it more difficult. I think that being said, I kept saying on Monday night, my catchphrase was ask me if I care, and the answer is I don't. And the reason I don't is because I've been on the other end of it too as a fan. I've seen Kirk Cousins get called for roughing, or Clay Matthews, I guess, get called for roughing the passer. Like, I've seen that happen. I've seen Jerry Rice fumble and it being ruled down by contact. I've seen the Fail Mary ruled a touchdown. All of those things I've seen. And not once did I bitch about the officials. I know I make a snide joke every now and again, but that's not the reason the Lions lost the game. The Lions gained 60 yards, less than 60 yards after halftime. They were +3 in turnovers. They didn't score one touchdown after those turnovers. They had their chances to put the game away. Something I said immediately following the Fail Mary was, control what you can, and the officials will not matter. Now, that doesn't excuse the officials for making bad calls, Jason. We talked about this after the Eagles game when pass interference wasn't called and wasn't reviewed. What did I say that night? The same. You guys can go back and listen to the show. The same thing. The Packers did not lose that game because of a call or a non-call. Now, I don't understand why pass interference was reviewable for them to not review it in that spot. That being said, that's not why Green Bay lost. Giving up a billion rushing yards, not scoring touchdowns in the red zone, those are things that are going to get you beat too. So Lions and their fans and Mike Florio and all these guys can whine and cry all they want about how the Packers are aided by the officials. But the vast reality of the situation is that Green Bay took advantage of their opportunities, and the Lions had several of those to put Green Bay away. They were winning 13-0 in the first half. They had chances to put Green Bay away, and they didn't. So whine about the officials all you want. I don't care. It's going to happen. Jason, you've mentioned in the playoffs that you should be worried that maybe the officials will make a call that changes the game. And I would be willing to bet that does happen. I'll bet that does happen. But Green Bay took advantage of their opportunities. I'm sorry that Bears fans are pissed because the Bears couldn't beat Green Bay, and Vikings fans are mad because they couldn't beat Green Bay early in the season, so they're rooting for them to lose because they couldn't take care of business on their own. Oh, well, I've been on the other end a million times, and I didn't hear anybody feeling sorry for the Packers when I didn't hear anybody feeling sorry for the Packers when that happened to them. So that's where we're at. Gary Sanchez just hit a 2-run home run, so it's about time that guy got something going at the plate. It's now 6-3 Astros in the bottom of the sixth. So maybe we're not cooked just yet. I don't know. They're trying to reel me back in here a little bit. But Jason, what are your thoughts briefly on the officials, and then, in the words of Bill Belichick, we're on to Oakland?
Well, first of all, Jacob, I don't know what I'm watching on TV here because my understanding was, and I've been told that Gary Sanchez should be in the minors.
Well, Yankees fans are stupid when it comes to good players, apparently.
I mean, you know, it's interesting. We're 3 days removed from this game, and I'm still struggling with how I feel. You know, because all anybody wants to talk about is how jaded the outcome was and how affected by the officiating the Lions were, and they lost that game. And no, it's 100% certain the Lions couldn't win. You know, they couldn't not kick field goals because they kept getting screwed by the officials. Listen, you mentioned you covered all the things, Jake. You got to find the end zone. TJ Hawkinson dropped a touchdown pass. The Lions couldn't get. I mean, after those first 2 drives, it's like they should have tried the flea flicker again. I don't know. Look, they couldn't generate any offense, and I'm not saying those calls weren't questionable. You said it. It happens in every game, and if you go back and you watch the beginning of the game and you focus on that matchup between Trey Flowers and David Bakhtiari, I guarantee you're going to see a whole bunch of Trey Flowers' hands up in David Bakhtiari's face mask that didn't get called. And so Bakhtiari brought it to the attention of the officials, and magically they called it. Makeup calls suck, but you know what? Just like you said, we've been on the other side of it. I know it doesn't help the Lions to have to take the shrapnel for our past losses by other teams. You know, we're talking about the Vikings, we're talking about the Seattle Seahawks, you know, we're talking about the 49ers, but too bad, man. At some point, the Packers are going to get hosed by a call. And they may end up losing a game because of it before this season is over with. Or like I said, like you said, God forbid, it happens in the playoffs, even worse. And nobody has felt bad for us in the past. And you can't care right now because later on when it does happen, do you not think that it's coming 13, 14, 15-fold to the Packers when karma comes around and bites them in the butt, which isn't going to be what happens. It's going to be the NFL and just very difficult, very poor officiating, very inconsistent officiating. And I don't know how they fix the problem, but the game is over and that's it. The Packers win. Mason Crosby, walk-off field goal. Incidentally, Jake, it wasn't by date, but this was the same Monday night a year ago that you and I attended against the 49ers, one day after your wedding. Happy anniversary, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
And Mason Crosby walked it off on that Monday night as well. 1 year to the day, Mason Crosby, who had a terrible, terrible game in Detroit that you had to sit through a week prior to your beautiful wedding, and watch him miss 4 field goals and an extra point, redeems himself against these Lions, and then finally, like you said, gets the monkey off his back. I still can't believe I'm saying that. Against Detroit. Beautiful, beautiful story. And, Jake, can we rate Crosby's Lambeau leap? I got to give him a 2 out of 10 because he couldn't even do it by himself. He needed help getting up in the stands.
Well, according to Facebook, and Facebook is a cesspool, but he had the refs' help getting up there. So I guess it's a 1 because he got the assist from the officials. So whatever. I guess that's the case. So that's the end of the Lions as we knew them. And they can piss and moan all they want for the next 10 weeks or, however long until we play them again. But that is what it is. In general, my opinion on the officials is always going to be the same. And I'll reiterate, control what you can and the officials won't matter. Let's move to Oakland because that's where Green Bay play. Well, they play in Green Bay on Sunday against the Raiders. And for the first time since December 31st of last year, I will be in house taking up with my brother and one of his friends from Colorado who happens to be a Raiders fan. But we will be there for Packers and Raiders Sunday at noon. John Gruden, Chucky, returns to Lambeau Field where he started his career quite some time ago. The Raiders are quietly good. Maybe the good bad team. I don't know. They just got done thumping Chicago. Well, I shouldn't say thumping, but they controlled the line of scrimmage against the Bears in a way that I was completely shocked by. And they were able to run the ball at will. They kind of move the ball at will in general. And Trent Brown's not playing. Tyrell Williams is probably not going to play. Those are two big losses potentially for the Raiders. So that's something to keep in mind, is that the Raiders have some guys that are missing, just like Green Bay does. And really, I think the big one is Trent Brown. He's a big money player that they paid to play right tackle. And he's not, if he's not able to go, their backup is not very good. And this could be another game for Zadarius and Preston Smith that we're talking about by the end of it. But the first thing really starts with stopping the Raiders' run game. Josh Jacobs is one of the front runners at this point for Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's been very good, and he's kind of the center point of their offense. And like I mentioned, the Bears' defense is very good, and the Raiders' offensive line pushed them around. They've got a good offensive line. Colton Miller is better than I anticipated him being. You've got Richie Incognito. Say what you will about him as a person. He's definitely a dick, but he's a good player on offense. Sorry, I mean, it is what it is. I don't want to travel down that rabbit hole, but he's a pretty good player, except when he costs them issues, or costs them yardage. So I guess that can happen as well. But he's a good blocker of defensive linemen. Let's leave it at that. And then Trent Brown was one of the storylines coming in if he was going to be able to handle the Smith brothers, but now he may not be available. But it really starts with that running game for the Raiders. John Gruden said he wants to throw the game back to 1998. They really do start with the run, and they start working their way into passing games. Derek Carr does not really stretch the field and throw the ball deep, which is going to be difficult, I think, for the Raiders, because beating this defense, it's hard to do that in 10, 12, 13 play drives. You got to have some big plays. That's when teams have had some success, is when they've been able to stack those big plays, like Dallas did, like the Vikings did with the big touchdown run from Dalvin Cook. There's plenty of examples. Chicago wasn't able to do that, and because Chicago wasn't able to do that, they only scored 3 points. They didn't have a whole lot of big plays. So starting with the running game, Jason, they had a pretty good showing last week against Kerryon Johnson. How confident are you they're going to be able to carry that over here on Sunday afternoon?
Well, that's going to depend on – so Kenny Clark did not practice on Thursday, and they didn't have practice on Wednesday. He's got a back issue, and is it a knee as well that's being listed? But it sounds like from Mike Pettine's comments after practice on Thursday that it wasn't a serious thing, and that wasn't really anything to be too concerned about. And I know that Kenny Clark hasn't really produced well over the last couple of weeks, but he's a big factor there. So if he's in or out, that's going to impact their run defense. And the Raiders are going to try to establish the run because, Derek Carr throwing it deep in this particular situation, probably not a great idea, not a great proposition, with the Packers secondary being a little bit better and more shored up. Kevin King is, still rolling. Jair Alexander is a thing. Adrian Amos is still back there. Darnell Savage is probably not going to play this week, but Will Redmond has been playing well. So the Raiders need to establish the run, and John Gruden's got an ego the size of Alaska, so he's going to continue to try to pound it. So the Packers are going to get tested. I think it's they should probably be very encouraged by the way that they played the last 2 weeks. I know in Dallas, the game got away from the Cowboys and they couldn't feed Zeke as much as they wanted to. So the stats there and the running, the defense against the run and the run stats for the Cowboys was really more a function of the score than it was the Packers shutting down Zeke Elliott. But you stack success, if I can, pay homage to Mike McCarthy, and you have to hope that they can carry that into this week. And it always starts with, you got to pass to win on offense and you got to shut down the pass to win on defense. But if you make Derek Carr have to throw it 45 or 50 times, that's a recipe for disaster for the Raiders. So big time emphasis needs to be on the run game and shutting it down this week. And you got Blake Martinez and Oren Burks back. I think they'll be fine. I foresee it. If the Raiders are going to stay in this thing, it's going to be because they're moving the ball via the air. I don't think it's going to be as much about the ground game.
Yeah, I think the matchups to win, this seems obvious when it comes to run defense, but it really is up front. When the Packers defensive linemen have played well against Chicago, against Detroit, those teams haven't been able to run the ball against them. When they haven't played well, when they're getting blocked, is when they've kind of been ravished by the running game. The Eagles game comes to mind, for example. Like I mentioned after one of the games, it's not really a case of want to or desire or any of the other intangible nonsense that you guys are going to hear It really is just as simple as guys are getting blocked. Kenny Clark is nursing a calf injury and a back injury, as we found out on today's injury report. He hasn't looked like himself in a while. Dean Lowry played well on Monday, but he hadn't played well in recent weeks. Blake Martinez is an average player. And when you have average guys back there that are relying upon guys in front of them eating blocks, and they're not eating blocks and getting off blocks, playing on the other side of the line of scrimmage, that's how you give up 5 yards a carry. Oren Burks is a coverage linebacker. He's not in there to stop the run. That's what B.J. Goodson's for. And he played really well on Monday night, too. That's something that I'd like to see a little bit more of in some run situations as well, especially while Green Bay is kind of down their hybrid safety line, with Darnell Savage out of the lineup, Chandon Sullivan, Will Redmond, guys like that are playing. Ibrahim Campbell came back to practice today, but he's not going to be ready to go for a little bit yet. I think you're going to need to see some more traditional stuff, if you will, from Mike Pettin. But I think that really does start up front. Football, there's a lot of things about football that have changed. Jason, you mentioned it's a passing league. You got to pass the one on offense. You got to stop the pass on defense. But one of the things you can do in a one-game sample like that is win up front. And if you can win up front and kick somebody's ass in the running game the way the Eagles did to Green Bay, you're going to win a lot of football games that way too. So that's just something to keep in mind. Green Bay, they can afford to give up some yardage in the running game. That's fair. They can't get clubbed like they did against the Eagles. So that's something to look for. Derek Carr, you mentioned making him throw the ball 50 times. That's a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for gold for Green Bay. I don't think Derek Carr is very good. I'm a firm believer that Derek Carr is somebody that we grade on a curve as a society. And I think that because he's not his brother, David Carr. So since he's better than David Carr was, we think he's better than he really is. But he's really just not that good. He's a below average quarterback, in my opinion. He throws the ball 3 to 5 yards at a time. Green Bay's going to have to play close to the line of scrimmage. They don't have any receivers, I think, that are really like, oh my God, they can threaten you that bad. Trevor Davis is coming back to Green Bay, so I'm sure Jason has some idea that he's going to wreck the game. But Trevor Davis just is not that good. So I'm not real worried about them in the passing game. Their tight end, Mr. Waller, he is a good player. And that's something where whether it's Sullivan, Will Redmond, Josh Jackson didn't play any snaps on defense last week. Maybe he's the guy. Maybe that's Tramon Williams' thing. Some of it will be dictated on matchups. But the Raiders are going to have some weapons that can test Green Bay. They just haven't. I mean, their offense is like above average. It's kind of like Green Bay's. It might even be below average. But I think defensively, Green Bay has a really good shot at controlling this game, even without somebody like Darnell Savage. So, Jason, in general, like from the big scope, macro scope, what are your thoughts on the defense and their ability to control a game like this?
Yeah, it's gonna. I think it's gonna come down to the coverage on the tight end. You're gonna try to get the ball to your superstar. They just paid him a bunch of money, and it's Chucky. I mean, he makes mistakes, and his offenses are crazy, and they're very complex for quarterbacks. But he's going to try to do what he can to win. I mean, he talked his way through and tried to finagle his way to a victory in the preseason against the Packers. So if you don't think he wants to win a regular season game on the road in Green Bay and upset the Packers and be the most annoying version of Chucky possible, he's going to bring it with the offensive game plan. I think the defense on the tight end is going to be really key. So, but Tramon also listed on the injury list with a knee, a kind of a late add to the injury list. He's one that becomes important because he's kind of that guy that you would put in there. That's that steady Eddie guy that's got the experience and can hang with the tight end. And you wish that it was Josh Jackson, but for some reason they just cannot see the field. He cannot find the field. So.
And forget Steady Eddie about Tramon Williams. That guy's been balling. I mean, he's 36 years old. He's almost as old as you are, Jason, and he is out there just killing it. And
almost as old as I am, but yeah. he's got a whole decade to go in order to catch up with me, if we're being honest. So not quite, but
yeah.
Let's not get
ridiculous here.
Well, he has been great, and Jake, I know you and a couple of other guys over at Packer Report and Cheesehead TV and all those guys over there that do film work. Somebody that I haven't seen a lot of emphasis placed on, and maybe we asked Dusty Evely or maybe you can or Ross or somebody, is let's break down Tramon, because if he's having a great season, it's a very sneaky good season that people don't realize because he's not showing up on the stat sheet. But for corners, you look at the box score, which is, an unfortunate thing that a lot of people do right now to try to determine how good a game turned out for X or Y or Z player. But, and you see, he only had one tackle. Well, if they don't throw to him all game, it's because they were afraid to throw at him. He did his job. It's kind of like an offensive lineman. If you don't hear their name, they're doing a great job. So I think the defensive game plan has just got to be, they've got to get to Carr. You got to get off the field. Don't let the Raiders extend drives. The pressure's got to get there. And I think it will. I think this is going to be another week where the pass rush has an opportunity. Your son's got a chance. Rashawn Gary's got a chance to make a couple plays here. Kyler Fackrell had half a sack. Maybe he finally shows up and comes up with some big plays again. The defense just needs to kind of take over and ride this thing out, because as soon as the offense gets healthy, you get Sternberger's ready to go. You get Devontae Adams back. The running game is in full swing. Hopefully David Bakhtiari continues to heal. I think he's still dealing with a little something there, because the bye week is still 3 games away. They got 3 more games to get through before they get to or 4. They got 4 more games to get through before I forgot the bye is after our game. So it is not coming up quick. They've got to find a way to get through there and just take the pressure off of the areas that are the most taxed right now. And obviously the wide receiver group is one of them. So the defense is going to have to step up and have a big week.
Yeah, they are. And keeping Derek Carr from just death by 1,000 paper cuts, that's really the way that they're going to have to do it. But get him in position, they'll turn the ball over. The Bears had plenty of chances to win that game in London. They were unable to. And because they were unable to, now they're sitting looking at a tough game in the face with New Orleans, while Green Bay has a game that's very winnable. And it's going to be interesting to see what Green Bay does, because that schedule that we talked about at the beginning of the season, Jason, and I don't want to look too far ahead, because obviously something can change in the blink of an eye. Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, that game looks like it's unwinnable at the beginning of the season. And right now, we don't know if Patrick Mahomes is going to play. He has 10 days to heal before they play Green Bay, but I don't know. I'm certainly not a doctor as far as anything like that goes. So I don't know who is going to be the quarterback for Kansas City. What I do know is that if it's not Patrick Mahomes, that the game certainly gets less difficult in that regard, just because if it's Matt Moore instead of Patrick Mahomes, like any quarterback after Patrick Mahomes is a downgrade. That's just the way that things are. So Matt Moore is definitely a downgrade if that is the case. But then you look at the Chargers, that's kind of a pseudo home game that isn't really talked about. And the Chargers aren't as good as we thought they were going to be. Now, they're really talented. I'm not saying that's a layup for Green Bay by any stretch. Carolina at home, and then the bye before they play San Francisco. I mean, they really do have a chance right now to get to, what would that be? Math here real quick. 6, 7, 8-1, 9-1 before the bye. I mean, it's enticing. They're certainly capable of doing those sorts of things. Now, granted, health and all that stuff, and that's the funny part about the way Green Bay is now, is they are winning games without some of their best players. Devontae Adams has not played since they played Philadelphia, and they're 2-0 without him right now. So, something to keep in mind as we move into the coming weeks here. And Green Bay, maybe we need to talk a little differently about the ceiling of this team, as I had them missing the playoffs. Now, I still think division winner, maybe win one playoff game. Something like that is kind of realistic, but the NFC is wide open. It's not like Green Bay's a bad team. They certainly have some good players and some good things that they do well. So maybe the ceiling of the team is higher than I ever anticipated it being. Something to think about. Let's move into our final segment. That is the game picks. Obviously, it's Packers-Raiders. It's noon at Lambeau Field. The Packers, the last time that they'll be at home for a few weeks. They'll go on the road for a 2-week stretch here before coming back to play Carolina before the bye week. So get your cheers and all that stuff in while you can. I think this game is going to be strange and ultimately kind of ugly. And I think that tends to favor the Packers. If you play an ugly game like that, it kind of favors the home team in general rule of thumb, I think. I think Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones both have some pretty solid days. I think the Packers figure out a way to get a play or two in the passing game and eat Derek Carr. I think that Za'Darius and Preston Smith are in line for a big day against a Raiders backup right tackle and an offensive line that has done well in the running game, but can leave a little bit to be desired at times in the passing game. So I think a big day for there. I think Jair Alexander gets a chance at an interception, which is something that he hasn't had this year, but that's because, I mean, on Monday against Detroit, they just didn't target him, which is a good thing for corners, too. Sometimes you're not getting interceptions because you're not being targeted. But I think he has a big night. I think Green Bay wins this game like 21-10, something like that. Maybe the Raiders score late and make it 21-17, something like that. The spread's 4.5. I wouldn't be surprised if it's within that 4-point margin. But a garbage time touchdown either way kind of keeps it that way. Jason, who do you like Sunday?
So Jair got the tipped interception off of Amari Cooper, but I think you're talking about him making a play and actually like stealing one, which I think is something we're all anticipating. And I want to see him house one this year too, by the way. No, I'm going to go with the Packers. It's kind of got that trap game vibe to it, although the Chiefs game the following week is maybe a little bit of a different thing to get up for if it's a different type of matchup. So this is not a Chiefs show, but I'm gutted right now. I'm gutted at Patrick Mahomes being injured. It's one of those things I was looking forward to a lot about this season. I had that game circled on the schedule. Tough road game. And selfishly, I want to see the Packers get tested. If they win that game with everybody in there on the Kansas City side, then, the sky's the limit. But hopefully he turns out to be okay. It just happened, so we don't have any updates there. But yeah, I think the Packers will win this one. And this could actually end up being one of those really low scoring games. It could be like a 17-14 type of game too, where like you said, it's a punt fest. I don't know what the weather is predicted to be, but it could end up being kind of more of a sloppy type game. The AFC NFC games are always, they're unscouted back and forth. So you don't have the benefit of having seen a team a lot of times. And this is nowhere near the same Raiders team that they saw in the preseason. So I do think the Packers come out with the victory, but more and more, like you said, the health, even though this team is deep, the health is the key. And at this point, there's so much in front of this Packers team in the NFC, and even looking beyond January, if I dare to say that, it's going to be about them being able to stay healthy and guys being able to play and come back and no long-term injuries. So that's the big thing is get a victory. I don't care how you do it, but come out of this thing healthy, because this injury report every week for the Packers is just pages long. It just gets longer and longer. And I mean, it's a lot of stuff that is okay. And it's veteran rest stuff, and it's things that aren't going to keep guys out, but they're still reporting it, and there's a reason for it. So got to get out of it healthy. And that's the biggest thing. But I'm going to go with the Packers to improve to 6-1, and they're going to start to take a nice little hold on the NFC at that point too.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. So we both like Green Bay to win. That's going to do it for this edition of Pulse of the Pack. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel. It's at Pulse, or it's under Pulse of the Pack, and with the logo, not the picture of Aaron Rodgers. I'm still working on that at the moment, but it's the one with the logo, not the one with Aaron Rodgers on it. Like and subscribe, leave comments on our videos. Let us know what we can do to improve them, because that's what we're here for. You can follow the show on Twitter. It is at Packer Pulse. You can follow Jason. He's at Jason Perone. And you can follow me personally. I am at Jacob Westendorf. Packers Raiders Sunday afternoon. Packers win on Monday night, 23-22. Big things starting to take shape here. The end of October is coming, which means football weather, cold, winter, nasty, all kinds of stuff like that coming for Green Bay. And hopefully, maybe some Lambeau Field home games in the playoffs. It's been a while, it feels like, since we've seen one of those. So thank you guys for listening to this show. Thank you guys for watching the video if you stayed all the way to the end. And as always, of course, go Pack, go.